Now it's time to get into the question that you're probably asking yourself. How do I actually study? What am I going to do? What do I exactly spend my time on? So I'm going to break down the different aspects of studying and what I've done to study effectively. The first thing you need to know is that taking stuff out of your brain is much more effective than stuffing stuff into your brain. Let me explain. For example, if you're doing exam practice questions, your brain has to work really hard to think about what's the answer, how do you tackle the question, what the question's actually asking, and all the different aspects of the question. Meanwhile, if you're just trying to read a textbook and trying to force stuff into your brain by memorizing words over and over again, writing it 1,000 times, it's nowhere near as effective. So the rule of thumb is, if your brain is working hard, then you're studying well. So the fancy word for taking stuff out of your brain is called practice recall, and that is by far the most effective study method. Much more effective than reading, highlighting, or recounting words over and over again. The first way I like to incorporate practice recall into my study routine is by turning the syllabus dot points into questions. Not only does this mean that you have questions for yourself for every single syllabus dot point, so you know the whole syllabus by the time you can answer all these questions, but it also means that you always have a bunch of different questions that aren't necessarily in IB past papers, but you know are part of the syllabus, so they can be very useful. Especially for subjects that don't incorporate every single topic within the exam. For example, for geography, they normally only include about 20% of the whole syllabus in their paper 2, whilst maths incorporates almost all of it. Following on from this, other than questions that you've made yourself from the syllabus, IB past papers are your friend and you should be using them throughout your diploma. For example, whilst you're learning about a new topic, look on IB Question Bank and search for that topic and do past papers for that particular topic. That way, you know exactly how the IB is going to ask you questions based on that topic. Because often IB papers actually assess you differently to textbook. So make sure you're always looking through IB Question Bank whenever learning new topics. A big step that a lot of people miss while doing past papers is keeping note of the really hard questions in the past papers. Trust me, you're going to thank yourself the night before your final exam. Instead of having to scroll through a bunch of hard and easy questions from past papers, you will only have to work on super hard questions where you know that if I can do those questions, you'll be pretty confident in yourself. So you want to make sure that you keep a list of really hard questions for every single subject. Another aspect of practice recall for your essay-based subjects is that you can actually incorporate mind maps into it. So what you can do is you can write essay plans in the form of mind maps in your book, make it open book at first, so you know exactly what you'd include if you had your whole resources available. A few days later, what you're going to want to do is to write an essay plan or to draw a mind map around the same topic, but all off the top of your head. That way, you can properly test yourself on how well you know the topic. I found this particularly useful for English paper 2, where I had to memorize a lot of quotes, and I felt like that I knew the quotes when I was reading them, but actually when I was doing my practice essay plans, I realized that I only knew about half of them. This way you can test yourself on how well you've memorized different quotes and what aspects of the syllabus you don't know so well. Once you finish doing the essay plan off the top of your head as best as you can, open your book, and then in a different color, you want to make sure that you add in what you missed. That way, once you have a collection of these essay plans over time, you can see which topics you forgot most frequently, and that way you can make sure that you revise these more than the other topics. One last point, as I mentioned earlier, is that whenever you have your notes, make sure they're based around the syllabus. You don't want to waste time and energy trying to memorize something that is outside of the syllabus and you won't even be examined on. Now, you've probably heard about spaced repetition, and it's become quite a buzzword within education, but it's become that for a reason. Essentially, the whole point of spaced repetition is to flatten the forgetting curve. What that means is that you'll be forgetting less and retaining more of the information that you've learned. By far, the most popular way of doing spaced repetition is through flashcards, and I've become in love with flashcards. I kid you not, 2 years ago, I made 800 different flashcards for my Chinese characters, and I've gone through every single one of them. So I was obsessed with physical flashcards, and then once I realized how impractical they were, I moved on to digital flashcards. And by far, the most popular digital flashcards is Quizlet and Anki. Quizlet is more user-friendly, and you've probably heard about it before, whilst Anki, it's a little bit more complicated, but once you get used to Anki, which is completely free by the way, it's so much more powerful than Quizlet. I'll talk more about Anki later on, but essentially with Anki, what you can do is that when you see a flashcard, if you find it easy, then the next time you'll see the flashcard is in 2 days, whilst if you find it hard, the next time you'll see the flashcards is within the next 15 minutes. That way you're only repeating the flashcards that you don't know very well. This becomes incredibly powerful, especially as you're trying to learn a lot of vocab or a lot of facts and information. If you ask any one of my friends, they'll tell you that they'll always see me using flashcards on the go. Whether it's on the bus, walking to school, or whenever I'm just in a car and I've got 5 minutes to spare, just get my phone out and start doing Quizlets or Anki. They're so convenient to do because you can just start and stop whenever you want. It's not like you're doing a full practice paper where it takes you 2 hours to do. Instead, you can do it for 1 minute or you can do it for 2 hours straight. It's incredibly flexible and super easy to do. Alright, now that we've talked about my love affair with flashcards, now I'm going to go on about why you should actually become the teacher out of your friends and peer group. Put it this way, if you can teach the topic to others, it means that you can understand it incredibly well for yourself. Because to be able to teach a topic, you have to know how each single step leads to the other. Because you have to be able to explain it to your peers and your friends when they ask you why, you have to be able to give good explanations to them. Other than forcing you to actually understand the topic at hand, it means that your friends are only going to ask you or send you hard questions. What this means is that you can actually add these questions that you find hard to your list of hard questions that I talked about earlier. Because realistically, your friends aren't going to send you questions if they find them easy because they understand them. They're only going to ask you questions that they find challenging and they want your help with. So you're building up your list of hard questions over time. Lastly, it is so much easier to memorize something if you understand every aspect behind it rather than just trying to rote memorize it without understanding the reasoning behind it. So it might sound weird, but this is why even the night before the exams, I had loads of people spamming me with math questions, physics questions, geography questions, all these different questions. And I was trying to help them out as well as I could because I knew that if I could answer their question, then it meant that I understood the topic well. So I definitely recommend for you to become the tutor or become the teacher within your peer group. Finally, single-handedly, the biggest thing that helped me throughout the IB was getting feedback. I can't stress enough the importance of getting feedback from your teachers on every single thing you do. Because if you're getting feedback, first of all, it actually means that you've done practice papers or you've done practice questions or you've done practice sentences or essay plans. So first of all, it actually forces you to study and do work that requires effort. And secondly, it means that you can apply that knowledge into what you're doing right now, into your next paper. This might sound really simple, but you might be surprised how many people just don't ask their teachers for feedback. For example, I'd written over 10 different English paper 2s under exam conditions and given them to my teacher over the 6 months before the exams. That way, even though I hadn't really done any study the day before my final English exam for paper 2, I was very confident as I walked in because I'd done so many practice questions and got all my teachers' feedback, so that way I knew that regardless of the question I was given, I could implement different aspects of feedback that I was given into that particular question. On the other hand, for geography, I really hadn't asked the teacher for any feedback at all. I just presumed that I knew the content. And although I was still confident as I walked in the exam, I was much more nervous the night before because I was doing a lot of late night study, last minute study, just going through the syllabus one more time. So I found that even though you might understand your subject really well, you still want to get feedback and do practice questions and ask your teachers for help and support. Because first of all, it'll make you more confident. Secondly, it means you can apply that knowledge in the exam. And lastly, it actually forces you to do work. I learned the hard way because in my first year of the diploma, I would rarely ask teachers for help after school or even in class. Meanwhile, in my second year, I stayed back almost every single day after school, trying to get feedback from all my teachers. I was doing practice orals with my Chinese teacher, with my Spanish teacher. I was doing practice essays for English. I was doing practice questions. You really want to build a connection with your teacher because the feedback they're giving you is going to be invaluable during your exam.